Today we are comparing ratios. A fruit and nut bar recipe calls for 4 cups of chopped nuts and 6 cups of dried fruit. Tanya increased the recipe. She used 6 cups of chopped nuts and 9 cups of dried fruit. Now in a recipe, when we increase it, you want to keep the same ratio or the same proportion for it to taste the same. So what would we want to find out from this question? Well, we'd want to know, did Tanya use the correct ratio of nuts to fruit? So these types of comparing problems have 3 steps that you want to go through. The first step is to write the original ratio or the recipe ratio. So going back to your problem, we can see that we need 4 cups of chopped nuts and 6 cups of dried fruit. So when we write that down as a ratio, we want to include the label with it just to make sure all of our numbers are staying organized. So 6 cups of fruit and the 4 cups of nuts. The second step is we want to write down our second ratio, or in this example, what Tanya actually did. So she used 6 cups of chopped nuts and 9 cups of dried fruit. So her ratio will be 6 to 9. And labeling it keeps it very organized. Then we go to our question. What are we looking for? We want to know, did she use the right ratio? Or are these 2 ratios equivalent? So we'll leave a question mark there until we go through it. And if you look at the numbers, you might think, well, the numbers don't really look like they're going to be equivalent, but we'll actually have to do one more step to find out. And that step is to find equivalent ratios for both of the 2 original ratios. So if we take the first ratio, 4/6, and our second ratio, we want to find a new equivalent ratio with a common denominator, which in this case is 18. And we say, well, how do we get from 6 to 18? We multiply by 3. And if we do that to the bottom, we have to do that to the top. So our top number will be 12. And keep it organized by labeling. In our second ratio, in Tanya's ratio, we still have our 18 as our common denominator. And we ask ourselves, how did we get from 9 to 18? Well, multiply by 2. And if we do that to the bottom, we have to do the same thing to the top. So our top number is 12. And again, we want to label it just to make sure we're keeping it organized. And then we ask ourselves, well, did she use the correct ratio? And if we look at the 2 equivalent ratios, we do see that they are the same. So the last step is to put your answer in the form of a sentence. Yes, Tanya used the correct ratio. Let's try one more problem, and you can pause at any time to see what you can solve on your own. So Celeste is making fruit baskets for a local hospital. The directions say to use 5 apples for every 6 oranges. Celeste is filling her basket with 2 apples for every 3 oranges. And we want to know, is Celeste using the correct ratio of apples to oranges? So again, we have our 3 steps. The first one is we need our original ratio. So back in the problem, we have 5 apples to 6 oranges, and we're going to label it to keep it organized. And our second step is we need to know our second ratio, or what is Celeste actually doing? She is using 2 apples for every 3 oranges, and we want to know, are these ratios the same? So looking at the numbers, 5 and 6 is just one number different, and 2 and 3 is just one number different. So you might think, yeah, they're equivalent. But we need one last step to find out if they are equivalent, and that is to actually find an equivalent ratio that has the same second term. So our first ratio, 5 to 6, and our second ratio, 2 to 3, our common denominator is 6. Which makes our first ratio very easy, but we'll go through the steps. And our second ratio, the common denominator of 6, we ask ourselves, how did we get to 6? Well, multiply the bottom and the top by 2. So if we were to visualize this, our first ratio is a basket of 5 apples with 6 oranges. And our second basket only has 4 apples with the 6 oranges. So the two ratios actually are not equivalent. They are not the same. So your answer in the form of a sentence is no, Celeste did not use the correct ratio. All right, guys, thanks for watching, and good luck on your math.